So, good afternoon, friends, and welcome back to the online learning with Department of Civil Engineering. So, as you're aware, we are together for the course on environmental studies. And if you recollect, in the previous session, we had spoken about energy systems, wherein you now have a brief understanding of how to distinguish between conventional and non-conventional, renewable and non-renewable. And if you recollect, we had focused more about systems such as wind energy, solar energy, tidal energy, and OTEC. So friends, we shall move on from that. And in today's class, we shall talk about policy interventions. We shall talk about technological interventions. We shall speak about modern environmental conservative measures. So basically, each of these topics that you see on the screen today, right now, they are in themselves a vast area, a vast repository of knowledge. To be honest, in simple words, each of those topics that you see is a subject in itself. Okay, now due to the restrictions that the curriculum has imposed, okay, I would be delving about say 5 to 10 minutes on each of these before moving forward. Okay, so friends, let's look at these topics. So we have environmental management system, which is popularly called as EMS. We have environmental impact assessment, which is popularly called as EIA. Of course, you know very well, better than me probably, about GPS, that is global positioning system. Okay, the geographical information system, that is your GIS. Okay, then we should also understand about environmental stewardship, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and then towards the end, I'll give you a brief review of carbon trading or emission trading. That is, we shall try to delve into understanding carbon credits. So towards the end, of course, after conclusion, we shall be listing the references for your kind perusal. So friends, let us now start with carbon trading. To begin with, to make it easier for you to understand, okay, let me show you a video first. Okay.
Let us break down for you how this all works. Every time an organization uses a resource that relies on burning fossil fuels, it creates carbon emissions, also known as a carbon footprint. Everybody has a carbon footprint. But when these emissions enter the atmosphere, they accelerate climate change, bringing, among other things, more extreme weather.
So basically, he's trying to express that, you know, every human being, every human activity, every developmental activity, every industrial activity is releasing greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, which can lead to triggering of global warming, which of course is connected with climate change.
Thankfully, the funding costs of low-carbon technologies and more resource-efficient practices mean that many organizations are reducing their footprints, becoming more resilient, and saving on energy expenditure.
So he's trying to tell you that since there are certain industries who are trying to go green, probably, you know, they're trying to replace the conventional resources with non-conventional resources. They're trying to go for renewable energy resources, wherein they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint. So what exactly is this carbon footprint? Now let's pursue it.
But reducing emissions is challenging. It's something that doesn't happen overnight. And with our present systems of energy and land use, preventing any carbon dioxide emissions is not currently possible in most organizations.
So let's be practical. It is not possible for any of us to directly become, you know, sustainable with negative carbon emissions. But my dear friends, there are countries in this world who are not only carbon neutral, but carbon negative also. Bhutan, one of our neighbors, is a best example of being a carbon negative nation. So if you want to understand why is it carbon negative, then this video is the best explanation for that.
This is where carbon credits come in. Buying carbon credits compensates for the unavoidable emissions you create today by financing projects that reduce or absorb carbon emissions anywhere in the world. Carbon credits increase the health and prosperity of communities around the world and combat climate change by financing projects that reduce the need to burn fossil fuels or draw greenhouse gases directly out of the air. Accreditations from internationally recognized standards give you the assurance that the projects producing your credits deliver the positive environmental and social impacts they set out to achieve. Moreover, your credits help finance projects that would not otherwise happen. So as well as offsetting your emissions, you are also supporting more sustainable forms of growth. How good is that?
Definitely good. Okay, but let us look at one more video wherein you will be able to have a simpler glimpse of what exactly is carbon credit connected to. My dear friends, when we speak about carbon credits, we are speaking about the concept of carbon trading. Okay, of course, I'll be showing you the video after my explanation, but what we need to understand is, when we say carbon trading, okay, basically when you say carbon credits, what is that you're being credited with? What is that you're debiting? Basically, this process of crediting and debiting is a form of trading. What are you trading? You're trading carbon dioxide. So friends, let us understand that carbon trading is a process wherein you buy, you sell credits with respect to carbon dioxide, that is with respect to emission of carbon dioxide. Okay, now we need to understand that carbon trading has been one of the central pillars of the European Union to reduce climate change. So if we are looking at a global solution to slow down climate change, to slow down global warming, then carbon trading is what we need to focus upon. Okay, carbon trading, or also called as carbon emissions trading, okay, this is basically a form of emission trading wherein a company, a nation, a industry, they specifically target carbon dioxide. That is, in simple words, where they calculate in terms of tons of carbon dioxide, okay, produced by any industry. Okay, now when I say carbon trading, okay, it is simply an exchange of credits between countries, between different countries, okay, where they have been designed to reduce the emission of CO2 to the atmosphere. Okay, now what we need to understand in this, let's try to understand the concept of externalities. Friends, whenever a country uses fossil fuels, it could be, your petroleum or coal. Since they are fossils, they produce carbon dioxide. But please understand, when the country, let's say US or India or China, okay, when these countries use fossil fuel and when they produce carbon dioxide, they are not paying for the implication of burning fossil fuels directly. Please understand, there are implications of carbon dioxide being released to atmosphere, such as global warming and climate change. But we all know that these environmental issues are connected. Okay, probably we can associate a cost with everything. Let us say health expenses, let us say rising prices of the fuel. Okay, please understand, while there are prices which are connected directly with these implications, there are other prices which are indirectly connected with them. Okay, now when there is a cost which is not included with the pricing of the fuel, then those kind of attributes are called as externalities. And eventually, in the context of environmental conservation, all these are negative. So friends, if we are not involving in carbon trading, okay, then we are indulging in negative externalities. That means when I or you consume a good, it could be, a petrol, okay, it has negative effect on a third party. In simple words, let us say, I drive a car or I ride a bike, I consume petroleum or diesel. Okay, now I am only paying for the fuel that I have pumped into my vehicle. into the tank. But then when this fuel burns, it is producing gases, okay, which has negative health impacts on certain other individuals. Okay, so these are negative externalities. So who takes care of that? So now I spoke from an individual perspective. Imagine when we talk with respect to a country's perspective, that is where carbon trading will help us. Actually, carbon trading came with the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, wherein the ideology was to reduce carbon emissions to mitigate climate change. So friends, with this brief understanding of what is carbon trading, let's look at one video which will enhance your knowledge.
Global warming. Sea levels are on the rise. The weather is becoming increasingly more extreme and unpredictable. Species after species face extinction, and severe water shortage threatens dry regions. All of these are direct consequences of our greenhouse gas emissions, and a trend we must stop now. Tradable carbon units are one of the most effective weapons in the battle for a better environment. But what is a carbon unit? A carbon unit is a permit to emit 1 ton of CO2. This is equal to the emissions of a one-way flight from Oslo to Bangkok for one person, or 5 months of driving by an average Norwegian motorist. So how does the emission trading scheme actually work? The emission trading scheme determines how much CO2 and other greenhouse gases we can emit. In 1997, most of the countries in the world signed the Kyoto Protocol. The aim of this agreement is that all industrialized countries should reduce their total emissions of greenhouse gases by at least 5%.
But friends, in this 1997 Kyoto Protocol, there were 3 countries who had not ratified it: United States of America, Australia, and Kazakhstan. Probably, in a couple of years, by the time, 1997 became 2000, Kazakhstan was party to this. But it took another 10 years. Probably by 2007, Australia ratified this. However, to date, United States of America is still not party to this Kyoto Protocol. And why is this? Because, when you say that as per the protocol, you will reduce the emission by 5%, it invariably means that, your industries will run 5% lesser time, or your industries will operate 5% lesser machineries, which means, you are looking at 5% reduced development. All right.
From 2008 to 2012 compared to their emissions in 1990. The UN distributes quotas of carbon units to those industrialized countries that have signed the treaty. These units set a limit on the level of emissions. This limit is equivalent to the total amount of CO2 that these countries are permitted to emit, and which is less than the anticipated emissions. Some countries are so successful in reducing their emissions that they simply don't need all the carbon units they've been allocated, while other countries may struggle to reduce their emissions and need more units. Countries may, therefore, buy and sell carbon units. The price of tradable units depends on how many there are in circulation. Similar to a stock exchange, prices vary according to supply and demand. Each country is individually responsible for deciding how to cut its emissions. Heavy industry is often responsible for a large share of a country's CO2 emissions. Many countries have therefore decided that these industries must make the largest contribution towards emission reductions. Let's look at an example. Factory A and B have both been allocated carbon units by their authorities. Factory A decides to reduce its emissions by implementing climate-friendly measures. Their reduction efforts are in fact so successful that they have carbon units to spare. These can then be sold. Factory B, on the other hand, is unable to reduce its emissions and has to buy carbon units from Factory A, for instance. However, Factory B can also cover its emissions by investing in CO2 reducing measures in Factory C, which is located in a developing country. Although this country does not have any obligations under the Kyoto Protocol, the UN can still approve the emission reductions and give Factory B carbon units equivalent to the reductions in Factory C. So, regardless of whether Factory B buys units from Factory A or C, the result is reduced emissions.
So friends, with this understanding, let's move further and let's continue with the next concept for today, wherein we shall be discussing about geographical information system, popularly also termed as GIS. So all of you are very much aware of this. These are modern technological interventions, but what we need to understand is these technological advances are also being employed for the benefit of environment. Okay, whether irrespective of the fact that whether your GIS follows an active system or a passive system, whether you're utilizing the sunlight or you're using artificial light. Okay, now GIS, when it comes to environmental domain, is basically used for monitoring, which may actually translate into conservation efforts and also with respect to mapping. So, if you recollect, when the Uttarakhand was facing floods, okay, especially let's speak about Kedarnath, okay. So GIS was a very good tool which was able to give a very good understanding and representative information on how much of area got submerged due to the flood, how much of areas got devastated, how much of area was disturbed due to those floods. In simple words, I can utilize GIS as a modern technology to tell you how much forest has grown over the past years or how much of forest has been destroyed over the past years. So basically GIS is a technology or a tool to show data in a better manner, representation. So invariably when it comes to disaster management, okay, conservation efforts, monitoring efforts, GIS is a very handy tool. So now let's move further. Moving on from repository to application, let us try to understand with respect to global positioning system. All of you are technologically savvy. Your mobile phones have GPS. You're able to easily identify the destination that you want to reach without any obstacles or hurdles. Your GPS is able to tell you with the knowledge trained GIS into it, which is the shortest route to take, where there is no traffic, and so forth. Friends, the same knowledge can also be used when it comes to environment. Let us say, for example, when we talk about monitoring the habits of the animals, whether it's an aquatic species or a terrestrial species, a avian species, or a wildlife. So for instance, if I'm able to use a GPS collar, okay, if I'm able to attach it to any animal, it could be a butterfly, it could be a tiger, I can easily map its movement. I can easily keep a track of its movement, wherein I can easily understand its habits, its migratory pattern. How will this help us? This will help us in reducing man-animal conflict. It will help us to improve the conservative efforts. Okay, it is only because of this GPS technology we were able to identify, what is the area which a tiger requires to easily move around. Only with the help of GPS we were able to identify how many countries that a butterfly called as the monarch butterfly has gone. Okay, we only with the help of the GPS technology we were able to understand that which path does a tiger or a leopard take while moving from one forest to another forest. So basically it helps us in mapping the prey predator habits and in reducing man animal conflict. But yes, there is a lopside for this. Every technology has gaps, every technology has flaws. So in case if the poachers are able to hack into this GPS, then it's going to be difficult. Nevertheless, now let's look at the video on that. Of course, there are all the conservationists are not in favor of this, but yes, it is really fruitful.
Scientists science in recent years has seen an explosion of wildlife tracking devices that are enabling new insights and scientific breakthroughs. That's the thesis of a recent paper in the journal Science, which argues tracking is essential in understanding how animals are reacting to the slew of environmental threats they face.
So here you can see that they are attaching a tracking device to a bird, a migratory bird. How will this help us? We can easily study and understand their behavior. How do they behave if there is an impending disaster? Because we say that these animals have the seventh sense. Okay, all right. Now, how is that they behave when the population dwindles or when the resources dwindle?
But different animals require different tracking devices, and as the technology develops, those devices are getting increasingly specialized. For birds and flying mammals, geolocators often take the form of a little solar-powered harness, which is fitted to the back of the animal and can weigh as little as half a gram. To collect data in the past, most of those geolocators had to be retrieved through capture, but an increasing number are able to transmit data remotely, which enables scientists to track a bird over its entire lifespan. For large mammals, like this mountain lion, collars are the preferred tracking method. But beyond tracking where they go, a lot of these collars can also monitor the cat's metabolism and behavior, among other things. Some trackers go even further, with one group of researchers using a miniature EEG cap to study how sloths sleep in the wilderness. Other devices let us take a more literal look at the lives of wild animals, with camera-fitted collars giving us, in this case, a bird's eye view of the wilderness. Beyond learning about animals themselves, the researchers argue these advances allow scientists to use wild animals as sensors to monitor the changing planet. Recent examples include the monitoring of Arctic temperatures and vegetation changes during climate change and documenting ocean currents, and in the future may allow for the estimation of altitudinal wind profiles based on bird flight parameters.
So friends, in other words, what he's trying to tell you is these animals are indicators of the environment. Okay, so depending on their movement, depending on their behavior, the human beings can take a leaf out of it in understanding whether our conservation efforts for our sustenance and their sustenance is in the right direction or not.
More broadly, the researchers argue tracking wildlife is important in understanding the unpredictable ways animals adapt to that changing planet and a vital tool for ecology in the future. For Newsy, I'm Sebastian Martinez.
Okay, now let's continue. Let's now move on to another technology or intervention, or rather I would say as a guideline intervention towards protecting environment. It was in the limelight and highlight for in the past few days and weeks and months. I'm talking about EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment. So my dear friends, if I want to put this information in simple words to you, okay, I would rather say that we are looking at a draft guideline, or probably we are looking at a draft report, or probably we are looking at a established report or a guideline. Probably we are looking at some kind of process, we are looking at some kind of machinery or a tool. Okay, and how is it going to help us? Let me try to explain environmental impact assessment to you with the example. Okay, now let us say Mr. X wants to set up an industry in a country, let's say India. So when he wants to set up an industry in India, obviously he wants clearances. Okay, he has to approach the government of India for getting clearance to establish his industry. Now, if he wants to get clearance, then he has to go for EIA process. Depending on the type of the industry, the EIA process can be rapid or comprehensive. Some of these processes can be completed in 6 months. Some of them will take 3 years, depending on the type of industry. Typically, the industries are categorized into 4 types, depending on their pollution potential: green, yellow, orange, and red. Green are those which do not cause pollution. Okay, they are eco-friendly industries. Yellow are those small-scale industries which do cause a small amount of pollution, but it can be handled. Okay, orange are those which are probably industries in clusters, okay, even for that matter, small-scale industries, which on a whole contribute to sufficient pollution. Finally, red color industries. These are those industries which can have a devastating effect on the environment. For instance, thermal power plant. nuclear power plant, mining, okay, water resource projects. So friends, if this gentleman wants to set up an industry, the first thing he does is he goes to a consultant who is expertised in EIA. Now what he will do, he will follow a series of steps. Step number 1, screening. Step number 2, scoping. Step number 3, impact analysis. Step number 4, mitigation and alternatives. Step number 5, reviews. Step number 6, decision making. Step number 7, implementation. So from country to country, the framework of EIA may change. That is why purposely I have showed you 2 flow charts. Okay. Now, in simple words, what happens is when this industrial proponent, when he goes to a consultant, first the consultant will see what category the industry belongs to. If it belongs to green, there is no need of EIA. Okay, but if it belongs to yellow, orange or red, then EIA is required. Now since this gentleman is a private entrepreneur, okay, or an industrialist, if he comes with a red industry proposal, then it is stopped. Permission will not be given for any red color industries. Okay, so let us say his industry belongs to yellow color or orange color, that means EIA is mandatory. So in that, what happens next is scoping. What is the scope of this project? What are the plus points and minus points of the project? For instance, does it generate revenue for country? Does it create employment opportunities? Okay, at the same time, negative. Does it cause deforestation? Does it cause pollution? Okay, does it cause depletion of natural resources? So you have got the plus point and minus point, and then you need to give weightages. Okay, are the plus points more than negative points? Then the next step happens wherein you talk about alternatives, wherein for every negative attribute your industry is bringing, you have to come out with an alternative solution. The industrialist and the EIA expert has to suggest alternative solutions to whatever problem that the industry is going to cause. Okay, after this, they are supposed to submit a report which is submitted to the Ministry of Environment and Forest, which is headed by the Prime Minister of India. Okay, then this report is reviewed by experts, okay, across the country and beyond the country, and they will give the review report. The review report has 3 patterns: rejected, approved, or to be reconsidered. Okay, in the third case, the industrialist has to go back and rework on the EIA process and make it more better with respect to sustainability and economy and environment, and resubmit it. So finally, after the approval is done, the industry comes into picture. So please remember, when the EIA process is going on, industry has not started. All that which is happening with EIA happens, okay, in between the 4 walls. It is all process of black and white. Everything is happening within office spaces. Of course, some amount of data collection, some amount of baseline data, some amount of data analysis, it may happen outside. But one critical attribute of EIA is the involvement of public. This is called as public participation or public hearing. So before the industry submits a report to the government of India, they're supposed to call a meeting with the public who is probably going to be affected by the project. And only after a discussion, interaction, and clearance from the public, only then the industry can submit to the government of India. So in most of the cases, the public itself would be rejecting it if it is going to hurt them. Sometimes, the government may approve, but the public would not bend. So friends, that is the controversy with respect to draft EIA 2020. I'll be showing you a video towards the end of this presentation. Now, what we saw was with respect to an industry, okay, which is yet to come into implementation. Now, what if an industry is already existing? How can we go about managing it better? So friends, that is wherein EMS comes, Environmental Management System, which works on the principle of planning, doing, checking, and acting. In simple words, continual improvement. So friends, EMS is a system which is inbuilt within a company. Okay, now the basic idea is, if you have EMS followed in your company will be more profitable, and will be causing least damage to the environment. Okay, EMS is something which will also increase awareness among the stakeholders, among the employer, among the employee, to understand what is better for the environment, what is better for them. Eventually, how is all this better for the company? In fact, having a EMS makes a company having a better competitive edge and a brand, okay, in the market. We'll understand this better when we talk about ISO 14001. So everyone knows what is ISO, International Organization for Standardization, which has its headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. Okay, so now ISO is something which is, voluntarily required for various types of organizations. For instance, even an educational institution can have ISO. Okay, so when it comes to environmental conservation, if an industry or a company wants to have a ISO rating, then they have to follow the guidelines of ISO 14001. Okay, let me show you a small video to help you understand this better.
With many companies now adapting to the new ISO Environmental Management System, or ISO 14001-2015, here's how AGF can help you with a basic understanding of one of the major requirements of the standard, most notably identifying your organization's environmental aspects and impacts. The definition of environmental aspects for ISO 14001-2015 is an element of an organization's activities or products or services that can interact with the environment.
So the first thing what EMS does is it helps an organization to understand which part of the organization, which activity of the organization, which attribute of the organization is interacting with the environment, or other words, what activity or process, okay, is going to cause environmental impacts. That is called as aspect.
While the definition of environmental impacts for ISO 14001-2015 is any change to the environment, whether adverse or beneficial, whether as a whole or in part, resulting from an organization's environmental aspects.
So identifying an aspect will tell you whether that activity has a positive impact or a negative impact, and how we can go about improving or increasing the positive impact and reducing the negative impact.
The definition of an environmental aspect is any part of an organization's activities, products, or services that can interact with the environment, positively or negatively. Therefore, initially using that statement, you should list all parts of your business in a register that have an effect. For example, waste streams, gas usage, electricity usage, water usage, transportation, oil, chemicals, and others.
Friends, EMS is something which can also be, done or incorporated by us at individual level. Okay, individually there are a lot of activities that we are involving in. So all these activities, all these processes, all these services, all the products, okay, they invariably are an aspect.
These can then be split into subcategories of electricity, air conditioners, lighting, compressors, equipment, and others. When identifying environmental aspects, all parts of the company's operations in the defined scope have to be considered, not just the obvious core manufacturing or service activities. For example, most facilities have a maintenance department, offices, a canteen, heating and cooling systems, vehicle parking, and contractor-supplier activities, each of which may have an impact on the environment.
So friends, what it says is, when you have a company or an industry, every single operation, every single department, every single service should be explored, should be probed, and should be included in your EMS. So now let's move further to the next topic. So I hope that now you have understood that, on a generic note, how EMS is actually going to help us. Once that we have understood what is an aspect, the next step is to understand what are the problems that is being caused by that, and how we can go about eliminating it, or rather, if not possible to eliminate it, how can you go about reducing it? Please understand it's a continuous process, which means, if in case you have come out with a solution, an alternative, the story doesn't end there. You need to review for the effectiveness, to check the effectiveness of your alternative solution. All right. Now, let's move on to another domain of today's understanding, that is with respect to environmental stewardship. So friends, now let me just give you a glimpse of the images. Okay, you are looking at a gentleman who's an advocate, an environmental lawyer. His name is MC Mehta. Okay, I would call he's an environmental steward. Now here you have the then environmental minister under Manmohan Singh. Okay, Mr. Jairam Ramesh. He's also a form of environmental steward. Here you have a activist, a gentleman who is talking to this minister about some environmental problem. He is also an environmental steward. Below you see teachers and students from our own college, from our eco club. They're indulging in cleaning up a lake. They're also environmental stewards. Okay, but then the gentleman you see here who is causing pollution, okay, as you can see smoke coming out from his industrial stacks, chimneys. At the same time, he says, I've planted a tree and I'm doing my best part for the environment. This gentleman cannot be called as an environmental steward. So what exactly is an environmental steward? Okay, now, yes, all other images, as you can see, they're environmental stewards. Friends, even if you go out and talk to somebody and give them some knowledge of how to protect an environment, you become an environmental steward. Okay, the eco club that we have in our college is basically an environmental steward. So what exactly is environmental steward? In simple words, any individual, any organization who is doing their bit to conserve environment, they are environmental stewards. Friends, there are three types of environmental stewards. The one who does the work, they are called doers. Okay, for instance, let us say, there has been an oil spill in a lake or a river. So those people who volunteer to go and clean the lake, clean the place, okay, these volunteers are environmental stewards. They are called as doers. Secondly, now these volunteers would require assistance. Okay, they need to go with safety devices, safety measures. They may need some equipments. Who will provide them? Somebody who sponsors them. So any company or individual who funds these kind of activities, okay, who sponsors these kind of activities, so they are donors. Okay, that is the second type of environmental steward. The first was doers, that is volunteers. Second one is donors, that is funders. And the third one are those kind of people, probably let us say your politicians in relative departments, or your teachers, or your scientists. Okay, those kind of stakeholders who on a day-to-day basis are involved in some kind of activities which is contributing to environmental conservation. Okay, now please understand, we don't have to be in limelight to be an environmental steward. What this lady is doing, this old lady from Chennai, she is also an environmental steward, and there is no publicity for that. Okay, everyone among me and you is an environmental steward. If we are doing our bit to conserve environment, okay, we all can become environmental stewards. Let's see a small video to motivate you to be an environmental steward. Now, when I say motivate you to be an environmental steward, it is not at the necessary end of these people, but rather, no, the cause for which these people fought. Yes, Unfortunately, they did meet a bad end. But the ideology or objective of motivating you is to make sure that, all of you can do your bit to protect nature. Probably, in this video, you will be seeing all those great people who are environmental stewards for wildlife conservation. Tomorrow, you can be an environmental steward by, creating awareness on pollution control, by creating awareness on plastic control. Anyway, now let us look at a video as a memoriam to those environmental stewards who worked for the voiceless, that is the wildlife. So friends, these are those brave hearts, okay, who spent their life, literally gave their life towards protecting environment. Okay, now I would advise you to watch this movie called as A Civil Action, which has John Travolta in the lead, which talks about how a common man or how a person was transformed into an environmental steward, that is wherein your environmental conscience is raised. When you become environmentally conscious, then you become an environmental steward. Now let's try to focus upon NGOs, non-governmental organizations. All of you heard about the famous Chipko movement, okay? But how many of you heard about the Bishnoi movement, which was the motivation for Chipko movement to start, wherein in the year 1730, all the ladies, okay, from the Bishnoi community had protested against the king for the illegal felling of trees. Okay, of course, down in Karnataka, we have Apiko movement. So friends, non-government organization is any organization which can work for any cause. Societal upliftment, okay, ban on dowries, protection of girl child, preventing, baby infanticide, okay, improving the girl child's education. There are so many objectives that an NGO can undertake. Now, I am talking in the context of non-governmental organization who work for environmental conservation. You might have heard of many of them. For example, Friends of the Earth, based in Europe. Okay, Greenpeace, French, that is France. Okay, you have WWF, you have got Plastic Change. So my dear friends, there are a lot of non-governmental agencies who are working down the, around the clock across the globe towards protecting environment. Okay, now if you come down to India, not just your Chipko movement, I'm sure most of you must have heard of Narmada Bachao Andolan, wherein Medha Patkar took the lead to protect the environment and the people who are going to be impacted by rising the height of the dam, okay, across Narmada river. The power of NGO is so strong that it can bring down the government to its knees. When the government fails, that is when the NGOs take over. But please remember, if you want to start an NGO, you still need the approval of the government. You need to be registered with the government of India or any nation for that matter. Okay, now friends, we are done with today's presentation. So today we have a very brief understanding. Okay, within the restriction of the time and curriculum, we have understood what is environmental management system, environmental impact system, GIS, GPS, and then we moved on to stewardship, okay, individually and at the non-governmental organization level. And of course, to begin with, we had spoken about carbon trading. So friends, as I end this presentation, I want to show you a video on the protest which has been raised against Environmental Impact Assessment Notification 2020. I want you to understand why the protest has been raised by the common man. The government of Shri Narendra Modi, whenever it has brought out any changes or any reforms, okay, it has been met with praises and backlash both. But this is probably the only step, only activity or initiation that he brought in has brought only criticism for his government. And let us see why. Because a wrong step can destroy the entire earth, our earth.
Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA.
A step wherein you assess the impact of any developmental activity on the environment. For example, setting up an industry.
The process of study which predicts the effect of a proposed industrial or infrastructural project on the environment. It falls under the Environment Protection Act of 1986.
This Environmental Protection Act of 1986 came only because of Bhopal gas tragedy. So the idea is to prevent such tragedies from repeating.
EIA covers projects such as mining of coal or other minerals, infrastructure development, thermal, nuclear and hydropower projects, real estate and other industrial projects. It prevents the proposed activity or project from being approved without proper oversight or taking adverse consequences into account.
So as you know, EIA is going to help us in making sure that no activity, no industry will be brought into implementation. Therefore, no consequences will be borne. So EIA directly rejects those industries which are not beneficial or rather going to cause significant damage to the environment. So if you have the EIA in place, no wrong industry or activity will come into motion. So what does this EIA do?
It compares various alternatives for a project and identifies the one which represents the best combination of economic and environmental costs and benefits.
So EIA is actually trying to help you to balance development and environment, but that is the EIA of the past.
EIA is a formal process in many countries and is currently practiced in more than 100 countries. India notified its first EIA norms in 1994. A new draft was introduced in 2020 but has been widely criticized for its problematic changes in rules. The 2020 draft of EIA allows post-facto clearance. It means any project that comes up without environment safeguards or clearances would carry out their operation.
That means even before they get environmental clearance, the industry can begin its construction, can begin the commissioning, can begin the operation. Then what is the basic fundamental ideology of such a EIA? So what is the use of even having an EIA wherein the damage has already happened?
In the new EIA draft, there is a list of projects exempted from the assessment. These include any project the government categorizes as strategic. Once a project is considered as strategic, then no information related to such project shall be placed in the public domain. All inland waterways and national highway projects have also been excluded from the public consultation.
So friends, which means if an industrial proponent comes to the government of India and says, I want to set up a nuclear power plant, it gets rejected. Why? Because it's not proposed by the government of India. So tomorrow when an industrialist who is very influential comes and contacts the government, and then the government proposes this project, let's say nuclear power plant, thermal power plant, then there is no stopping it. So these are the flaws of the system. Okay, every activity has a damage to the environment, whether you like it or not. So exempting any projects is foolishness.
There is a provision that exempts construction projects of up to 150,000 square meters from EIA. And
this is a very bad move. You know why? Because when it comes to air polluting industries, number one industry is concrete industry. Okay, or rather let us say cement manufacture. Okay, the one which causes maximum air pollution. So now this has given a leeway even for those industries to continue working without any restrictions. So is this really the development that you're talking about?
Public consultation. According to the new draft, violations can only be reported by a government representative or the project proponent and not citizens.
So very simple. Now that you're not involving public, now that you're not involving NGOs, there is no one to stop you or protest when it comes to your activities. And anyone who does it becomes anti-national. So friends, that is why this kind of reform, so-called reform, is being criticized.
Any environmental impact assessment is presented for a public hearing. It gives the public a chance to understand the project and its whole process. Inadequate time for public consultation questions the transparency and credibility of the assessment process. But the new draft cuts down the current 30 days for public consultation to 20 days. Experts say most of the provisions in the new draft of BIA proves to be a regressive departure from the earlier version. Recent incidents such as the gas leak at the LG polymer plant in Visakhapatnam and the blowout and fire at the Oil India Limited in Assam are some of the examples that points out the importance of EIA in our country.
So friends, if in case you had a proper EIA, proper EMS, then these disasters such as Bhopal gas tragedy or Vizag, all these could have been avoided. So these are lessons that I and you need to learn, okay, when it comes to environmental conservation. So my dear friends, I'm done with the presentation for today, and these are the references for your kind perusal, and you are welcome to go through any material for enhancing your knowledge. In the subsequent classes, we shall understand about environmental pollution and control, specifically with case studies. Okay, so thank you. If you have any queries, the forum is now open for interaction and discussion. Thank you once again.